am super excited to have Jen Bullard joining us today, who is founder of YesYes Know, a full service agency that startups turn to for everything UX. You and I met a few weeks ago at an event in Cambridge. And as soon as we started talking, I just realized that you have such a great perspective on the user experience and UI. And I thought this would be a great conversation to have on Founder Connect. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here as well. And I recall our first conversation. It was great to meet you because it really sounded like we were working with the same types of organizations and the same types of people who were at similar places in their founder journey. And it sounded like we had a lot of information to share, maybe with a similar audience.
And it's so fun to meet people who are in this same space, but are coming at it from a different perspective. You know, you and I are both people who have expertise that supports founders on their startup journey.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what we're going to dive into today. But first, I always ask this question when we start: what's bringing you high energy these days?
I'd say right now, what's bringing me high energy is teaching. I teach a graduate level course at Northeastern. It is called Human Behaviors for Interactive System Design, which is a really long title. And basically, we explore all of the cognitive psychological factors that influence how people perceive a design and whether or not a design works for certain people. And we just had the second class meeting last night, so we're still pretty early in the course. And it's it's fun stuff. It's stuff that I really believe in. It's content that my students can really relate to. So they're learning, I'm teaching, and it's really energizing.
That is awesome. So, what's one of the most surprising things that you have learned, just in teaching that class?
Okay, so last night was part of the lecture was about color, and we talk about accessibility and color blindness. And one of my favorite pieces of fact is that anywhere from 12 to 25% of women are what is called a tetrachromat, which means instead of three cone types in your eyes, you have four, or they have four cone types in their eyes, and it allows them to see a broader spectrum of colors. And it's called a mutation, which I think is interesting and maybe, part of sort of the male dominated like world of science. But basically it's only present in women because you have to have two X chromosomes for the cone to express itself.
Oh, that's very cool. That course sounds so interesting. I'm sure that the students are loving it.
I hope so.
Yeah. And so what inspired you to start YesYes Know? And I can't remember, when did you start it?
So YesYes Know has been around for about 5 years. And I had a lot of experience in in-house UX design teams. I had some experience doing freelance consulting for different software companies. And I was ready to work for myself. That was really important. And I wanted the flexibility of scheduling that comes with being your own boss. And I also wanted the variety. So when you work for an in-house UX team, you deal with the same product over and over and over again. And you might deal with different product lines or different feature sets, but you're really working with the same product. And when you work for an agency, you get to have a much broader view, right? You get to work on two or three products at the same time. And that variety is it's really interesting, it's stimulating, and it enables you to keep learning. So you're constantly learning about different domains or different industries because you need a very broad range of knowledge base, I guess, to work with different companies.
Yeah. I think that's also why I love doing what I do as well, because there is so much intellectual stimulation and challenge in working with different companies and the problems and issues that they present. And so that's really neat. I think one of the other values that we can bring is because we see so many different companies, we see how others do it, we see best practices, and we can sort of form our own best practices because we are experimenting and working with so many different companies and the variety that that brings.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. You see good practices here that you can translate to help other people who are struggling with something similar.
So when a startup is working with you, what's like a typical engagement?
So, with the earliest startups, I'd say that we tend to have conversations, and those conversations result in a hey, if you're still at it and you have funding in a couple of years, let's work together. Then, with more mature startups, usually they're coming to us and they have some amount of product market fit and they have some customers, a lot of maybe beta customers, or maybe they have like a big anchor customer that has really found something in the product that they really like, but they need to refine that product to, for a larger go to market strategy, if you will. So they they can usually see where their product is doing well and where it's not doing well. And so what we try to focus in on is where are the struggles, where are the points of friction? And we have a number of different research methods that we can draw from in order to really pinpoint what's going on with that usage scenario and where it's not going so well. And then we employ our design skills to help fix those problems, working with both the product teams and the development teams, depending on the startup and who's in house, to really smooth out the points of friction that they're having so that they can find broader adoption of their product.
Mm, that's really interesting. So what tends to be common points of friction that you see? Or are they just sort of all over the place?
I'd say they're all over the place. We worked with one product that had a really difficult time with onboarding. That's that's a pretty tough one to get past if you're a new product in the marketplace and people struggle to onboard. So the company already knew that this was a problem they had to fix. And we worked with them. We did usability testing. We made recommendations and we were able to reduce their onboarding experience from 3 hours to under 3 minutes. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, and that type of stuff is it's based in getting to know the user, seeing what they're actually capable of, actual real life users, and tailoring the experience to those needs, which we're very experienced in, but I do believe anybody can do it. It's just a matter of having the desire
Mm.
and knowing. I think a lot of times when companies come to us, they know something's wrong, but they don't know exactly what it is or they don't know how to fix it.
Right. And if I'm thinking, usually when I work with companies, founders in particular, they have a specific niche or talent that they bring to the venture. And if it's co-founders, each of them typically brings something, whether it's a passion for marketing or a passion for the tech, or in some cases, a passion for the design or the specific product. And, when you're trying to kind of build so many elements to a product, you're not going to be talented at all of it.
Yep.
Right. And so that's where your view and vantage point can be very helpful because that's something that you do day in and day out. And you see that very clearly. Or they might
Yeah.
not because they're trying to manage the whole thing.
I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like everybody has strengths, everybody has weaknesses. And with every group of founders or with every startup, they have strengths in-house. And the trick is for them, I think, figuring out where the weaknesses are and filling those weaknesses, or filling those gaps with outside or hires to really build the skill set that you need to take an idea to market.
And so if you were to give advice to founders who are trying to get in front of this and they're, because normally what happens is that, founder or co-founders start with a, very, very small team. They start to build around that. And so as they're looking at the product and the design around that, what would be your advice on how they can prepare and get in front of some of the bigger pitfalls that you see when you start engaging with companies?
I think the most important thing is talking to your users. The trick is talking to your users. You have to know who your users are. And so, depending on where you are in your startup journey, you may not have found your target users yet. I've I've talked to startup companies who are convinced that their startup users are going to be a certain segment, right? A certain user population, and they're not quite there yet, right? So finding out who your target users are is really important. And not being afraid to pivot. Like if you have a product that you are convinced is perfect for a certain user set and you go out and talk to that user set and they're not buying it, don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to shift who you think your users are and talk to those users. And once you find that sort of like product user fit, get to know what they're capable of. As much as possible, I'd say put the product in front of them. Watch them use it because humans are really bad at self-reporting, right? We can make up all kinds of reasons why something didn't work for us, but we're rarely accurate about our own behaviors. So watching somebody do something is often a lot more informative than asking them about the experience of doing it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really great tip that that I think is going to be very helpful for founders.
And
Um,
sometimes founders are the target user. Like they've created this product because they were working in this particular domain. They needed something that did, what they're creating and it didn't exist, so they decided to make it exist. That's a really nice situation to be in because you have a certain domain expertise in-house. It can be difficult, I think, when domain expert in-house doesn't understand that not all experts in that domain share their same needs, capabilities, or viewpoints.
yeah, that's a great point because founders often, they're inspired to solve a problem that they've experienced themselves. And that's a great place to start in creating your product, but then verifying that other founders, or other people share that same problem is a critical step. So just switching gears a little bit, as a company founder yourself, how has the experience been, different from what you imagined it would be?
Interesting. I need a lot more help than I thought I would.
How so?
Um, I I started off thinking I can see it all in my head so clearly. I can see how this will work. And in some ways, that has played out in real life. We get clients, we do an assessment, we do good work for them. They continue to need our services, they refer us to other clients. All of that sort of has gone as expected. The surprises for me have been around the sort of up and down nature of owning your own business and having a small business. We get contracts, we work on those contracts, money comes in, and then we have a dip where we have to go out and get more contracts because the stream of clients or the stream of work isn't steady. And so one of the people that I've connected with along my journey described this as Death Valley down here for a lot of when they complete their contracts and they haven't been sort of filling that pipeline. That's when a lot of small businesses sort of die. So that was a surprise. Also, a surprise is how much I just don't like doing business development.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and this is actually one of the pieces of advice that I would give to other founders. Find out what your weaknesses are, find out what you don't like to do, and then hire somebody to do that. So that's where I've actually sought out a lot of help, is with business development and doing that piece of things, because it's not a strength of mine.
Yeah, as it's interesting, you and I have been in business for about the same amount of time. And I think anyone who hasn't gone through what you've described probably hasn't been in business long enough, because it's just inevitable. Like there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows, and it's just a matter of time, before you experience those things. I agree with you. Coming into owning my business, it's something that I underplayed the importance of, got bit in the ass for not paying enough attention to it and not investing enough of my time and energy around it, because it's not a strength. And so I avoided it at my peril. And I agree, there are times when we find other people who have that strength, who can do it better than we could. And in this case, I also decided to dig deep and really learn the fundamentals and address some personal blocks that I had around putting myself out there, because I realized that I wasn't good at business development because of that discomfort and that self-doubt. And so that's something that I had to really work through, actually, with my own coach, in order to feel more comfortable with that. I agree. I still think it's something that there are parts that I outsource and have someone else manage. And then there's also another piece that I've just decided to embrace because it's going to make me a better business owner.
So it's nice to hear you say that, because I feel like that's been a big part for me too. That just speaking to you or going to the networking event where we actually met, those things are hard for me. And I talk to friends about it and they're like, really, that's hard for you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a closet introvert. These things, the nice thing is hearing from other people that it's hard for them too, because then you're like, maybe these things are just hard. Maybe
Right.
I'm not alone. Maybe it's not all that unique for this to just be hard.
Yeah, and I'm like you, for me, walking into a room full of people I don't know is just shoots my anxiety up. And so I don't prefer that. And yet you and I both made the effort to go to that event in Cambridge, and we met. We had a great conversation. I think we ran into each other over at the coffee
It was the coffee
kiosk.
machine.
And from it came a great conversation that we've had the chance to continue here. So it's probably proof that it's worth us stepping out of our comfort zone to do it. Because then we also meet like-minded people who, I've been able to learn from you, and hopefully you've been able to learn from me a little bit from the respective points of view that we have serving the same clients.
Absolutely. The conversation around the Death Valley made me think of something else that's been surprisingly a surprise. And that's having employees. When you have the dip in contracts, suddenly I'm worried about other people, right? So I'm worried about keeping these other people employed. I'm worried about employee retention because I've built a team of people who are really great at what they do and really great to work with. And so I don't, want to have to let people go when I have that dip. So the having employees piece of it wasn't necessarily part of the initial plan, but it sort of grew out of necessity because during the pandemic was, we were a shop of two designers, lost our anchor client. So there was no employees, no work, no clients. And I had to sort of build up that client base. But in order to then serve the clients, I had to build up a team. And so now that I have this team, I'm incredibly concerned about their well-being and keeping them as a well-functioning team because they're all great. So that was a surprise that sort of came out of necessity. And suddenly I'm not just worried about, paying my mortgage, but I'm worried about their mortgages too.
So how do you keep your team aligned?
It's interesting. I employ a lot of techniques that I learned from being an in-house UX designer. I have one-on-ones with every single person on my team every week. That I think is really important. And my first employee was Parker, who I brought on as an executive assistant, and now he's my director of operations. He keeps the wheels on the bus. He is the point person. We all rely on him to keep everything moving forward. If there's a problem, he can always get my attention. So I'd say Parker.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a really interesting conversation. And I think that you had some really fantastic insights to share that founders can relate with and potentially be preparing for as they think about the design of their product and, navigating some of the pitfalls around that. All right. Thanks again, Jen.
You're welcome. Thank you.